Now, the objective of this exercise is not so much to lift information, but rather how could we learn from the practitioners in order to subsequently create a process so we can get the practitioners help us design a strategic approach to teach other organizations on how you do it. So there's lots of activity going on in Puerto Rico at the grassroots level, but we intentionally were not seeking for grassroots organizations. We wanted to work with a little bit with organizations who have some trajectory, working with these kinds of issues, with the idea that over time we can systematize that information, that sort of language, and systematize the experience in order to then create a platform of learning, practice, and teaching. The organizations, they're in at least somewhere here, let's see. There they are, right? It's a combination of housing and economic development. A critical feature of which sample was to try to find out if organizations had the capacity to create complementarities between types of funding. And by that, what we mean is, can you combine federal funding with the use of the market? Can you engage in traditional social entrepreneurship for the purposes of creating alternative streams, which could, over the long run, add to the sustainability of the organization? It's clear that by this point that you can't, I mean, if your diet is only on federal grants, you're going to get very skinny. Okay? There is, right now, a great necessity, which is to learn about how organizations can put together the capacity to raise funding. And raise funding meaning 5, 10, 15, 20 years. Housing and community development and urban development take that long. Right? You might expect to see a building going up, but you might not see a community getting rebuilt in the space of 1, 2, 3 years. So in order to raise that money, in order to bring about those transformations, you need a lot of operational capacity on the ground and a lot of expertise. So we were probing for that. Tell us a little bit of what you know, what you've experienced, the cycles through you've gone in the last few years, and so on. Now, so let me just jump right away into some of the things that that we found. In terms of origin, these are pretty much, except for 2 of them, organizations which were founded in the early 1980s and 1990s. So they've been around for some time. They've accessed funding from the federal government, mostly from HUD, from FEMA, from SBA, from USDA. Nobody in this list has yet used or accessed CBDEDR. There's only one organization in Puerto Rico who's accessed directly CBDEDR money. But the intent is, if you could manage some HUD funding, if you could manage some FEMA funding over time, I think you should be able to grow the capacity to handle CBDEDR, right? So that's kind of the working theory. They've used the market in a variety of ways. Sociedad, which is in Trujillo Alto, Community Development Corporation of Trujillo Alto, has used new market tax credit to finance the development of elderly housing. They participated, for example, selling market tax credit to Goldman Sachs, who served as a buyer of those tax credits. So, it's one example. AMPI, Mayagüez, Asociación Mayagüezana, they work with people who have disabilities. They have a model in which they have been supporting these populations by creating homes that then are incorporated as separate entities, as LLCs, that then serve as separate units in the management of the project, and then sort of helps the organization not to just have a completely centralized institutional infrastructure, which is difficult to manage over the long run. We found a school, CADE, in Moca, who's completely built a brand new from scratch, and they combine government and private funding for the purposes of creating special education. So we found a number of organizations, so they can do it. The question is how we're going to expand it and how we then connect them to a variety of other funding sources. In terms of training and capacity building, they all have a need for training and capacity building. They all want capacity and training. However, they're sick and tired of the cheap and empty workshops that the training market in Puerto Rico is created after Maria. Lots of spin, lots of recommendations, even coming from people who've never been and done it. Right? And that is, reaching a point of saturation. Organizations want to hear from people who have done some of this work. So this is sort of part of the idea of the project. Let's just get people from our own organizations who've been doing some of this work. And if they have not done it, I bet you they have a very good learning curve, so we can really, with support, with Centro and other organizations, we can just create that pool of knowledge. But we need depth. We need depth in the training and capacity. The post-emergency training, it's just not doing the trick anymore. Certifications. Some of these organizations may need certain kinds of certifications to access certain kinds of funding. Like you need to be certified as a CHIDO. I'm sorry for the, let me just go to the, I think there was, I don't have it, this one, but, or you need to be certified as a community development finance organization. And some of this training is necessary for the organizations to be able to access some of the funding. So we define organizations who either have been certified in the past or are in the process of doing so in the present. Obstacles, good list. In that funding ecology, there are a series of, I would say 4 fundamental problems. Lack of high-quality financial intermediaries to facilitate access to key pools of funding, such as housing tax credit, new market tax credit, or even CRA funding. In order for these organizations to get access to that funding, we need a whole process of vetting those transactions, for which in Puerto Rico we simply do not have the kinds of trusted intermediaries to do so. Alternatives, we can collaborate from organizations in the diaspora who have developed some of that capacity. Second big problem, difficulties in financing operating costs through the period of lengthy funding approval. And some of these projects take 1, 2, 3 years cooking them. And in the meantime, you need to be paying your staff. And in the meantime, you need to be running your organization. There's no money for financing operating costs, right? And that is a big problem because the shallow cost of that you need to incur into in the process of then hopefully getting that grant can be significant. Number 3, lack of information flows as a result of intentional political gatekeeping. Right? Information is not flowing. Organizations don't have a very clear view of what is the landscape of potential opportunities. And when they are able to identify the opportunities, the political gatekeepers come in to request a transaction fee. Right? How sophisticated to say that corruption is in the midst of all of this. Number 4, lack of data, applied research and information to document community needs, elaborate project justifications, and for project monitoring and evaluation. You just don't get the money because you say you need the money. You need to create the project, justify the project, present the project, and for subsequently evaluate the project. Most organizations still are in the framework and mind frame of acquiring money. Right? It's just not about the slaughterhouse. You also need to chop it and then sell it into the meat butcher shop. Right? So that part is a very important part. Leadership and gender. This was not even thought about in terms of looking for it. It happens to be that when we were done with 10 organizations, 8 of the executive directors were women. And there is a natural history about the importance of women in community development. They always have been in the front lines. They continue to be in the front lines. Unfortunately, they're not allowed to rise beyond the front lines. But I think there is a very interesting movement of women who in Puerto Rico are taking the the helms of community-based organizations, and I think they also need support, and they need to participate in higher up levels of executive training, and I think we should see them as a very important role in terms of long-term development. Yes. Other strategic observations, which I think some of you who work with CBOs and other people will be interested to explore. Many of the organizations of this group that we work have very extensive geographic target zones. I'm working in 15 municipalities, I'm working in 18 municipalities, I'm working in 25 municipalities, right? Which creates a big problem from the standpoint first of applying for grants. Because grants, immediately the first question they argue, what is your target zone? What is your geography? Right? And I understand this has to be is perhaps a strategy of survival, which has to deal with the fact that you need to be just stitching funding from here and there, that allows you to just move around, turn around, and do all the tricks that you're trying to do. But that extension is also creating a lot of distraction and a lot of mission drift. And so we need to think about how can we control the strategic projection of some of these organizations towards areas that are critical in the process of reconstruction. So there might be spreading themselves too thin. They have, they're led by, second important observation, committed professional staff, and the stability of that leadership is a very important and fundamental asset for these organizations. How do we maximize the opportunity to continue nurturing that sort of existing leadership, right? It is hard. Burnout is being well studied in community-based organizations all over the world. After you put in 10 years in a CBO, you age 20. Right? And I think that needs to be part of the conversation, how we support this leadership, both men and women, and young people, right? That are sort of part of the pipeline. Interestingly, Elisa at Ponce Neighborhood Housing Services, she uses AmeriCorps students, right? They might be young, but you need to introduce them into, en la salsa del sofrito from right away, because they need to just understand how things are moving from now, right? Another important part is these organizations are very aware of the challenges of working in situ, of working in the space where they're located. And they know how difficult it is, right? And that to say that we often don't need to be telling them how short they are at what they do, right? They are aware of their shortcomings, and I think that's how do we improve the capacity of organizations to position themselves in the public arena as intermediaries between the state and civil society. My take is that throughout the last 50 years, the Puerto Rican state has developed, and it goes both ways. Puerto Rican citizenship also has developed a sense of codependency, with the state. The state only goes to the citizens when it needs them for fundamentally electoral purposes. And the citizens, essentially communicate with the state for the purposes of complaining how the promises that you made and that you not deliver are affecting this community. So they are kind of interconnected in this very perverse cycle of codependency that we need to intervene and sort of break it up and begin sort of help organizations position themselves as legitimate intermediaries vis-a-vis the state. I'm not saying they're not. I'm just saying that also we need to understand how injecting this third actor into the equation is going to challenge the historical dynamic of essentially citizens that communicate with the state. Now, the temptation of the state is to then offload everything into this sector, ending up overloading and killing the goose of the golden eggs. Right? So we need to work in that process. What to do? I have 4 points on what to do. Number 1, we need to create an affordable and an open source education platform with grounded content. Right? That delivers by practitioners who have navigated the pathways of social entrepreneurship and have completed projects in the complex funding ecology of the island and the mainland. Right? That we need that kind of platform. Number 2, we need to create learning opportunities for non-CBO actors. Right? Within the complex ecology of funding and social entrepreneurship, you have other actors who are going to be there interacting with the CBOs who have no idea what the CBOs do or who they are. And that doesn't facilitate the conversation. I always tell my students, you're either at the table or you're on the menu. Right? And I think that's a very important thing. 2 more quick points. We need to intensify the creation of island-based intermediaries in various policy sectors, which in tandem with CDOs could engage federal funding. Can't be alone. Can have sometimes the doers serving as intermediaries. We need a thicker ecology in the process of connecting CBOs to the federal funding system. And 4, and no less important, we need to safeguard that educational efforts are horizontal, democratic, inclusive, and equitable, and that take into consideration the local context and the participation of citizens and communities. And I think we've been hearing quite a bit of that. And I don't mean cheerleaders. I mean people who are willing to come and engage and remain engaged, and that we find ways of maintaining and keeping them engaged. Because the business of community development and building, affordable housing is just not a one-year deal. It takes years, perhaps a couple of generations. I hate to do that, and I hate to tell people that, but it's a reality. And throughout the process, we need people engaged. We need several generations. I'm going to leave it right there. Questions at the end. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me, before the another panel, remember that Dr. Méndez mentioned this morning, in the future, the near future, that we see the more cut by the overseas BOA in Puerto Rico, because Puerto Rico needs to start to pay the debt in the next year. This means the government will have less money to attend the petition of the municipality, organization. In this sense, it's vital that organization strengthen your capacity, because the government going to have less money for attend the petition of the citizen. That is very important, the investigation that Ramón is taught about you.
Well, good afternoon. My name is Elisa Rivera. I'm the Executive Director of Ponce Neighborhood Housing Services. Ponce Neighborhood Housing Services is a non-profit housing counseling agency certified by HUD, and we are also CDFI certified. So we work with housing counseling, community development and engagement, and we have been around for over 25 years, so it's been a while. And we take care of families that want to buy a house, or they're having issues paying their mortgages. And in between, financial capability, post-purchase, counseling, and all of that. So our organization has been targeting specific vulnerable and low-income populations since forever. And obviously after the Hurricane Maria, we have been working and assisting all these communities. We attend 15 municipalities. That was one of the reasons that the professor here says about we as a nonprofit organization working with so many municipalities and target areas at the same time, because we attend the southern coast, but we also attend 5 municipalities in the central area of the island. So the necessities and the realities from the southern coast are not the same as the central area. So we have to be diverse in that specific point, and we are always making sure that these communities and these families receive what they deserve and especially what they need. So that's very important. So we have been listening today about how this hurricane devastated our island, but we also need to listen about the facts in the aftermath of Maria and how the consequences of this event has been affecting our families and communities that haven't recovered from this. 2 years from now, more than 300,000 homes were damaged or destroyed as a consequence of the hurricane. According to the U.S. Census, in 2016, there were 1.5 million households in Puerto Rico. Thanks to a report prepared by the Center for Puerto Rican Studies, we know that more than 250,000 or 80% of those houses are vacant at this moment. We are certain that this number has increased exponentially in the past year because of the continuously migration and expiration of the temporary moratorium of foreclosures. Foreclosures, nobody wants to talk about that, but sadly it's a situation that here in the state, it's almost fixed, thank goodness, but in our island, it's actually getting worse. Delinquent mortgage swelled to more than 140,000 mortgages in the immediate aftermath of Maria. Can you imagine? All these people, I mean, when we talk about these numbers, we think about specific numbers, but we don't think about these numbers as faces, and they have families. I mean, those were mortgages, but those were homes with probably 3, 4, 5 people living in those houses. And those people were in risk of a foreclosure. There were more than 100,000. Moratorium were granted temporarily, and 84,000 mortgages remain past due, and 18,000 were in foreclosure process, and that was last year, in 2018. And the actual numbers, it's much higher because the statistic is not taking into consideration the 20,000 mortgages that were sold to the second market. That's like a tendency that has been happening on the island because of the situation. The banks, instead of taking the risk, they are selling these mortgages to the second market. Right now, over 30,000 families are still living under blue tarps. That means that we still have 30,000, and I said that again, 30,000 families. You have to multiply that. Because one household has 3, 4, 5 people. And they're still living under blue tarps at this moment, 2 years later after the hurricane. Thousands of families are still living in precarious conditions because more of the 60% of the claims to FEMA were denied. And we still don't know why. They're using the excuse of the titles and the deeds and all that, but people, we have a reality in Puerto Rico, and it has been uncovered like a can of worms, and it was. We have generations of families living in homes for 60, 70, 80 years, and they never had the title or the deed because it was like in the 20th century, like 1920 or 25, that you have this terrateniente, this like landlord that has a lot of land, and they just give it to their employees, if you can say that. We call it arrimados in Puerto Rico. And they passed away, their families move away from Puerto Rico, and these families stay on that land. And they build their homes, and it has been their homes for generations. And when these events happen and FEMA comes, okay, where's your title? I don't. we don't have any title. We have been living here for 60 years. My grandpa was living here in the 1940s. I mean, stuff like that, so. All this data is the key to understand why it's so important to establish an effective recovery process. The recovery process has been tampered with bureaucratic protocols that has been delayed the process. I think that you have been hearing all these stories over the news about the delays on the funding award and stuff like that. And the reason is that we have manuals right now. CDBG, there are manuals and guidelines and stuff like that, but are those effective, assertive? Another thing is that these manuals has been made without taking into consideration the real necessities of the communities and vulnerable populations. And this is one of the reasons that these protocols and these manuals and these guidelines are not really the real solution for these families. Because if you don't know what is going on in El Barrio Luquepi, in Yauco, that right now it's a community in a risk zone, it has the riverbed in the middle of the community. So they're at risk, but they have not been taking into consideration their necessities or alternative for mitigation or relocation. So that was one of the biggest issues. The biggest problem and concern related to this recovery plan is the lack of civil engagement, as I said before, during the process of preparing and creating it. The voice of the communities has not been heard, and as a result, we have manuals and guidelines that are not well structured. Another concern is the forced displacement as a result of a lack of effective strategies relating to mitigation and relocation. Sadly but true. We have right now so many communities. We have communities in Salinas. Salinas is a municipality in the southern coast of Puerto Rico. And a lot of these communities are probably in a tragic situation that they're going to be displaced. And it's going to be like enforced, I mean, a la fuerza. Because a lot of these families has been living there for 50 years and they don't want to move. And there are no assertive and real relocation strategies or mitigation strategies. The only alternative is you have to move. You have to leave your home. So, and part of the reason is that nobody's listening to the communities. Because we know that HUD gives the opportunity to identify mitigation strategies for these communities. So it's not alien or foreign for the law, as for example for HUD, to identify these mitigation alternatives. But because then nobody's listening to the communities, nobody's taking into consideration these alternatives, they're not giving to the communities. So part of the recommendations that we as organization has been identified and we're advocating are well-structured and organized workflow, including the manuals and the guidelines. It's very important that we include the community leaders, residents, nonprofits, and community-based organizations in this workflow. Because this is the process that is going to give assistance to these communities and these families. So it's imperative that the workflow is well structured and well organized. And right now, it lacks a lot of these very important points. Establish accessible procedures to all population, including the vulnerable ones, such as elderly, people with disabilities, low-income families, veterans, among others. We have right now, part of the recovery process, a program called R3, That's reconstruction, relocation, and rehabilitation. And you know what? You need to go to the internet to submit, to fill out the application and submit. You know how many families that we have that they don't have access to internet? You know how many elderly people, old people, senior citizens, viejitos, we have in these communities that they don't even have a cell phone? They don't even know what the internet is. And they need to go to the internet to fill out the application and submit. So where are their voice, their rights? Nobody's taking into consideration that. Transparency in all process. Please don't make me talk about the transparency. We have been talking about the transparency the whole day, right? So we need it. Urgent. Establish assertive assistance programs for families in risk of foreclosure. As part of the plan for Puerto Rico, it was a program called Catch Up. And it was an assistance program for families in risk of foreclosure. The program was not accepted by COP. So right now, we don't have any alternative or program that is going to cover or assist these families that right now, at this moment, and in the process of foreclosure, are going to lose their home. What are we going to do with these families? Our organization right now has like 15 families that are get back on their feet and they're paying their mortgage on time, but they have a debt like $1,500 maybe, and they have no money to pay that. And they're on time right now, but they have that debt. So our organization is giving like these very small loans to these families to cover that debt and keep, paying on time. So, but we are very small and we have so much necessity and not so much resources or capital to do that. So, establish real mitigation and relocation strategies based on concerns, need, and interest from the communities at risk. That's what I said. Real mitigation, looking for alternatives, real alternatives. We can, check if the floating areas can be, the rivers can be relocated and stuff like that. I don't know the terms in English. Los cauces del río, riverbeds. So that's very important. Hacer diques.
Canals.
Exactly. And we know that those has been alternatives before, and they have been good alternatives, and they have worked before. So, but nobody's talking about that at this point. Prioritize the foreclosure portfolio as the first option in case of relocations. Stop thinking about constructing new houses or new neighborhoods. We already have so many houses in foreclosure process or are already abandoned. A lot of people abandoned their homes and came here to the States. They didn't even care if they were going to have problems with their credit. They just abandoned the island, they abandoned their mortgage, and they abandoned the property. And the property is sitting down there, becoming a nuisance for the community. And we have that resource and we have that asset that we can use as an alternative in case of inevitable relocation. So that's part of the recommendation that our organization thinks that it's a good alternative. So thank you very much, and if you have any questions at the end of the presentation. Thank you.
Maybe you can, if you have questions, if you could write them in your postcard, in your index cards, and I'll collect them at the end. And maybe this could be a time to answer a couple of questions over the setup.
Do you have any questions?
Yeah. Written, or can I just say? I'm sorry, I arrived late, but I do know this is the housing panel. Have you talked about the flood mitigation plan?
Yes.
Did you talk about it before I got here? I'm sorry, I wanted to ask a question about that.
There, for real, there was no really flood mitigation plan. Most of the time, and in the plan, it says if you are living in a risk zone, and it's the area, it's considered a floating area,
Right.
you need to move.
Right. And the point I'd like to make, if you haven't made it already, and again, I'm sorry, I apologize for getting coffee. The entirety of Puerto Rico is a risk zone.
Yes.
So when you're telling people to move from a flood zone, you're asking them to move to a mountain where there might be a mudslide. So I'd like you to speak to the logic of that, and if the same requirements will be made of commercial developments once these people vacate these zones, if they vacate them at all. And assuming this comes to that point, what legal recourses do these people have?
Very interesting, and at this point, I can tell you that even the housing department is looking for support from the legal aid pro bono organizations for these situations, because there is no real answer for that, if you can say that. And it's very ironic in the way that you put it, because all the island is under a risk zone. So what are we gonna do? Are we gonna move, like to another island, to Vieques or to the States, and we're gonna abandon the island? So, but if you look in the FEMA webpage, they don't have an actual update of the floating zones. They have the 2012, I guess, and they haven't updated the information yet. But we know, because it has been public information, FEMA has talked about that we are under a floating zone, the whole island, and most of our island is under risk zone after the hurricane and all that. But if you look for the information, you won't find it, accurate information. So.
One more question.
I was wondering, actually just really piggybacking off of what you just said, so you're doing so much. I'm aware, I know this is going to be a workshop as well, the GIS system. Are you guys working with, I know a lot of Hunter students are learning, Hunter college students are learning, and when I was part of the Cultural Ambassador Program, they enlightened me on being able to take the GIS system in order to document these flood zones that you yourself are talking about, because it's hard to be able to rebuild when you can't even visualize the damage. How do you guys work, have you guys worked to be able to bridge the gap that it's easier for both those who are collecting information for the GIS system and for you guys who are providing housing and trying to form solutions alongside them? Has that been done at all? I'm just curious.
I mean, you're talking about gathering information, data.
Are you guys also, because it's been taught as such a great tool considering all the circumstances, and especially when it comes to visualizing the effects on the island and being able to have a map in front of you. I was just wondering, because you guys are also asking for help collecting information from other organizations, and I'm just wondering, is that need even being met at the moment?
Yeah, definitely. Our Statistic Institute has been shut down. Mario Manassi, he was talking earlier in the panel, he used to be the executive director, and that was part of an agency from the government, and it was shut down. So right now we don't have an official agency that collects data. So right now we have most of our data spread it out in different organizations and community leaders, even universities like Hunter and Center for Puerto Rican Studies. So I think that what we really need is not to keep gathering data. Maybe it's to put it all together, in a very uniform and well-structured document, maybe in a coalition with different organizations and agencies, in order to put all that data in one document. So it will be more easy if you want to look for this information over the internet or even in the universities. It will be a very helpful tool for students, for nonprofits, even for the government.
If you go to the Center for Puerto Rican Studies GIS platform, under Review Puerto Rico, you will find the most comprehensive and
Yeah.
sophisticated layering of GIS
Oh, no,
that exists, and it is publicly available to anybody who could use it. It's also interactive, and it has, I would say, everything that could be accessed in the open source environment is right there, and it's in the process of being
No, I
implemented.
know, I also know it's also, like, as you said, spread between organizations, so I was just wondering, since my last time being here, if that has at all improved for you
It
guys.
will be a very good project for any university who is interested to gather all this information, and put it in one document as the Center for Puerto Rican Studies did with the report. That report from 2018 was used even in the government. The government were quoting that report. The New York Times, the Washington Post, I read a lot of articles, and they were quoting this report from the Center of Puerto Rican Studies, relating all this information and data about the situation in the aftermath of Maria.
Well, good afternoon. I will try to speak. I cannot be on the share. That means I'm going to talk to you. And my name is Elisa, and the presentation that I'm going to do today is going to be a little bit different because we are talking about housing developed. But in our case, it's a community housing development that was created just after Hurricane Maria. And what is important to explain to you, where we are located is in a very isolated mountain in Puerto Rico, in the town of Lares. I don't know how many of you know where is Lares, or Bartolo, Castañer. Anybody hear about Castañer?
See?
Okay, where we are in a barrio, it's called Bartolo. It's a very old barrio. There was a lot of coffee plantation in the 19th and the 20th century. And what happened is, just after the hurricane, I have a friend that lived in the mountain, and I went to visit him. And he lost his house, and I decided to support him. I spent every weekend after, that maybe was 2 months after Hurricane Maria. And I went to this barrio, Bartolo, to give some spiritual and emotional support to my friend. But after 3 weeks, I just decided to go around the community and asking for any other help that I can bring to the community. And I've been very active in social movement in Puerto Rico, and I was concerned, in this mountain community. And one of the neighbors of my friend I asked her, do you know what is, any need in the community? And she said, yes, you have to look for the arrimados. She was talking about the arrimados. Arrimados are worker farmers they've been living in somebody else's land. They are the landless people. And those people, after the hurricane, a lot of those houses, they lost their home, and the new owner, mostly kicked them out, and there was like homeless people around the municipality, and the Centro, the municipality are not paying attention of those families. And I started walking through the community. Can you imagine? This is a small town, 1,400 sea level. It's very high mountain that it's been coffee plantation for more than 150 years. It's the coffee zone of Puerto Rico. A lot of farmers, a lot of the family, they are dedicated just for coffee, growing plantain, bananas. After the hurricane, everything was lost. You have no job, no coffee, no bananas, no plantain. A lot of people was no any option of living. And then I visited a family, and that family was living all together in a very small van, and they was just tired, and one of them told me, we cannot. We have an abandoned school in the community, and we are tired to be living in this situation. And it was the most inhumane situation you can imagine. 5 people, adult people, living in this little, and they say, can you help us to occupy the school? I was like, well, let's see, And what happened then, we ended one day with my friend and another person from those family. We went to see this abandoned school. And what happened, this school that was abandoned, that was shut down in 2015, was the first agriculture school in Puerto Rico built in 1922. Was 80-year-old school that was shut down in 2015. I will show you some picture. This is the original school that maybe was in the 1930s, 1940s. And then that was in 2005. The government invested a lot of money, built a huge school, and that was shut down in 2015, right? And was an elementary and middle school that served to a lot of different communities. And an important detail of this, the reason I decided to work on that community at this moment was two reasons. Because the Animal people, I feel like I was taking a political education program in Brazil with the landless movement. That means I had that experience before, and I find out that we have the landless people in Puerto Rico. You know, I found them, and I was like in shock. And second one, because those areas, that was the last Taino and Indian settlement in Puerto Rico, that zone. And I started seeing a lot of Indian people walking on the mountains, and I was like, oh, that's real, that was there. And we have a lot of elder people that was, you know, living by themselves, you know, very, very deep places in the mountain. And the community was alert that it was there, but they was having trouble to get water, you know, no electricity. And from one day to another, to make the story short, we just decided to start cutting all the lot from the school. It was a big school, has 7 buildings. And my friend and I, we decided, wow, well, why we don't do a housing project? You know, like talking like dreaming. We have a school now. Why we don't convert that in a housing project? And that was Manuel Rojas Luzardo was the last name of the school. Manuel Rojas Luzardo was the one who initiated the revolutionary movement in Puerto Rico. And where we are established right now is where the Grito de Lares started. You know, have a lot of political and historical meaning. And I was completely convinced myself that, you know, the Maria sent me to the mountains, and that was I decided, you know, from one day to another, I said, okay, let's do it. And I ended, you know, I live in San Juan. I'm not from that area. You know, I have to drive 2.5 hours to go to that place. In the mountain with bad road after the hurricane. The road was completely devastated. You know, it was really hard, no electricity. But, you know, it was wonderful people, a lot of humble people there asking for just support. And because I was part of the agroecology movement, that I heard a lot of people say, no, after the hurricane, we have a lot of organic things coming up. It was not organic. We've been working a lot. A lot of people has been doing a lot of social justice work in Puerto Rico for many decades. But Maria gave us a chance to put a lot of things together, to realize and visualize things that we always expected to happen in Puerto Rico. And Maria gave us that opportunity. In my case, I was working with a lot of coastal community, and it was my first experience working with farmers in the mountain, and it's a completely different world, you know. And another important, the average income of those farmers that I was working with is $200 a month, okay? I was dealing with a lot of elder people that they work all their life collecting coffee. Nobody paid Social Security for them. They don't have no place. They don't collect any money, only food stamp, maybe $70 a month, and maybe another extra that is maybe $60 extra that they give it like cash money for those people, and then they have to sell all the bananas and plátanos to give an extra money for living. That means that, you know, those family was, you know, was a lot of family on that community that was really in need at that time. No job, no houses, and no hope. And the Centros, the Apoyo Mutuo, there was an initiative that started around the island just after the hurricane. We started working with communities and we start develop some community in long-term project, and that's one. And that's how we found the school. The school was abandoned, was completely full of books on the floor. We have no room at the time we get in. We have nothing. Just the intention to clean and convert that space in a dignified home for a few families. We start cleaning, maybe 5 of us from the community. You know, we work with Solidarity, you know, those are the Center for Mutual Support Network. Well, our values are solidarity, long-term commitment, social justice and social wellness, and improve the better life for the Jibaros, the people from the mountains. And we have 3 centros de apoyo mutuo in that zone. The one is Centro de Apoyo Mutuo Bartolo, that is in Lares. We have another one in Las Marias, and we have another one in Lares town. And how we start as a distribution center when we took the school, we start receiving a lot of donations from different places, and we was, you know, our place was like a distribution from, not only from the people from our community, because where we are, we have like 4 towns that we are bordered. Maricao, Lares, Adjunta, Las Marias, you know, that means that it's like 5,000 people who live in that mountain zone. At that time, they don't have not too many governmental agency supporting them, you know. A lot of grassroots initiative. We receive donations from all the world, you know. What was the problem that people from the rural area are facing right now? Housing, work, the small farmer. After the hurricane, all the help came to the big farmer, but the small farmer are completely abandoned, and they are looking for support to restore their farm, the coffee plantations. And the road conditions are really, really bad, and it's not too many social and cultural events, you know. That's why when we decide to start visiting our viejitos, these ladies is Doña Carmen. Doña Carmen is the lady who did a DNA test. She's the one who has 90% Taíno. And she lives in Maricá, in Las Indieras. And this is, you know, those people was the people that we visited in the middle of the crisis, and those are the people who really touched my heart. And I just decided I will be there for them. And it was a beautiful, great experience. Those are the farmers that I'm saying, those people are living with $200 a month, if they're lucky. And it's a lot of elder people that never get the Social Security pay. We start receiving solar lamps, and we was distributing them to the people in the community. And you know what we did? I took this picture because this is a historic picture of Castañer. After Hurricane San Felipe and San Ciliaco, the U.S. government established a program to develop some housing after the hurricane. And one of the places where they started that project was in Castañer. That community had a long, long history, and those people was working to rebuilding their home in 1935. And, you know, 100 years after, or maybe more, but that's how we found the school at the beginning. We entrance on November 4, 2017. We start cleaning, we start cooking, we do a community kitchen with the people from the community. It's important to say that I did 3 important, network, no. Acuerdos, agreement with the University of Puerto Rico. The architecture department give us a chance, and they do a plano for the school that helped me to convince other people what we was trying to do and give me some structure. And we also have a lot of religious institutions. The Catholic Church and the Episcopal Church help and decide to help us, and that's why how we're gonna start receiving some funding to get the material to transform the classroom into apartment. The first, okay, that's a lot of the people from the community get involved. As I told you, everybody who lived on the housing project studied at the school. There was a student, and they living now in their first grade classroom. And it's, at the beginning it was really hard for the people from the community to understand that we are using the school, and they have a lot of emotional thing because that was the school from the community, and we start transforming them in a social project. But at the same time, that school was abandoned, and the people start seeing that what we was doing was really good because we are rescuing that school where everybody studied there. And we use art at the beginning to heal this traumatic experience. We brought one of the well-known artists from Puerto Rico, and he started offering art classes. And we start, helping the community to go through all that experience, to be without a house, waiting for some donation to transform that classroom into an apartment. That take us, a while. It was not like, we spent maybe like 8 to 10 months to make our the first 5 apartments. And this girl lost her home, and she used that mural as a healing process for herself. And she said, Elisa, can you bring me some color? And she made like a list of 25 colors. I was like, okay. And I bring it to her, and she did it, and she spent like a week, and she did that murals. We use a lot of murals inside the school for, put the people together to work and transform the space. That is the mural of the Museum of the Artesanía, because we use a strategy. We have to rescue and occupy the whole school. We put 2 buildings of housing. We have the first phase of the housing project, and right now we have 28 people living on the school. And we are trying to create a co-op, but it's an occupation. That means that we are in a transitional moment to ask the governor to legalize and transfer the school to the community, and we are going to organize a co-op. I'm sorry, but I take so much, but I'm so excited about it.
We have a very short time, but let's say to a question.
Yeah, I heard that, if this is true, that Castañer is no man's land because it lies between 4 municipalities, so nobody takes care of that community, is that true?
That is one of the problems, because we have one street that belongs to Junta and the other one to Lares. And then we have another barrio that is half in Yauco and half is Lares. And because the isolation, they are so far, they've been having trouble. That's why Castañer is serving to all those communities, because Castañer has a hospital and a fire station and a mailbox. That's the place where, because the common denominator is like all these communities are an hour from the main central urban area for their municipality. That means everybody go to Castañer because it's like 20 minutes, 30 minutes.
But then no mayor feels responsible for the area,
No.
correct?
You touched on that there's so many vacant residential homes in Puerto Rico right now, and there being such a need for housing. What can be done legally in order to take over these homes? If you know, if there's anything that's going on now, to try to legally take over these homes so that they can be given to folks that need a house, people that are homeless or low-income families that have been displaced or, relocated from work.
In the CDPDR, the action plan that the Housing Department and Housing Urban Development approved, the communal organization are doing pressure to change and to put the alternative, the use of vacant property, the alternative to relocate family and not new construction. This is an alternative that the community organizations are pushing to the government to recognize this alternative.
But the thing is that right now, the big interest from the island, who are the owners of these properties, I'm sorry, they need to understand what it's been happening, and they need to go to the table and talk with the, I don't know, governmental agencies, even the nonprofits. And it's a process because the banks, they have their banking and financial institution culture and philosophy, and sometimes they don't understand. They have an inventory. And we have this inventory, and we are going to sell this inventory for the price that it's supposed to.
There's a juggernaut here. That's to the, on the one hand, developers who obviously know that building anew is more profitable and easier than construction. Right? And what they want to go back is to do what they did in the 70s and 80s and build new construction. Right? The hassle of reconstruction, and for those of us who've been involved in rehab housing know that every unit is different, whereas new construction, all of them would be the same. Right? So that's one thing. So they're pressuring, not wanting to do that. On the other end, the housing and urban development systems create disincentives for reconstruction. Because in the process of authorizing funding, they're asking small construction companies, who will be the ones who will be interested in all of these. In addition, you want to encourage local companies to do this. Requiring bonding requirements that are completely obscene for these kinds of organizations, especially an island who's been in a recession for 15 years. Nobody has that kind of cash to run around, right? And a lot of the operations are also functioning as a form of reimbursement. So the small construction companies don't have the incentives to go into the business, and the big ones have no interest whatsoever, because reconstruction is much more difficult than building from new. So I think there's a lot of policy adjustment that needs to take place in terms of also what Elizabeth touched upon, which is the flows, right? And how you sort of help these small construction companies to assemble or to participate with bigger ones in the food chain in order to do reconstruction, bundling, or some other kind of work. But as it is laid out right now, there are no incentives whatsoever to go after a serious process of, for example, buying in bundle in trunk from the banks in order to create some sort of, housing trust that could serve even using, sweat equity for rebuilding. That right now, there are no simply conditions in order to, have that conversation, although the ideas are around.
And in our case, in the rural area, Occupy is the only option. The construction cost is very high. Nobody wanted to do anything in the mountain because it's too much. It takes so long to, move all the materials. That means not too many options. That's why our project was a real priority for a lot of young couples that they don't want to leave. They are farmers, they want to stay, but they cannot afford to pay a new house or rent a house or buy a property because their average of getting paid $6 an hour. And for a lot of young people, they saw that project as an alternative project for them, and they want to be there permanently because they know they don't have no option. And the government never pay attention of them and never ask them, are you going to have, they want them, everybody to leave. And we have a lot of American company went there after the hurricane looking for workers, farmer workers, and we lost a lot of them. But if they have an option of leaving, they will stay. And that is important. We want to keep the agriculture. That place is one of the most important for an agriculture in Puerto Rico. And those are the people who has the knowledge of agriculture for many centuries, and it's really important to have a space for them.
Okay, one question more.
Federico, yeah, I have a question. Ramón, you talked earlier about the need for building capacity among nonprofits in Puerto Rico. One of the issues that I have seen for many years is not just the need for development, but the need for the organizations on the island to be included in what you could, call the mainstream of community development, particularly when it comes to finance and investing. I mean, besides it is a CHGO, right? Community Housing Development Organization. There are CDFIs in Puerto Rico, But if you look at the list right now, there are 6 CDFIs in Puerto Rico.
We're one of them.
You're one of them. There are 2 new ones on
Yes.
the way, thanks to the people with the credit union movement,
Yeah.
Cooperativa. With that, but in comparison, Mississippi with the same amount of people, 79. Arkansas with the same amount of people, 19. Louisiana with 1 million more, 57. New Mexico with 1 million less, 17. There's kind of like a disconnect.
Yes.
Well, that's, I
when
think,
it comes to,
that's precisely the point of what we're doing bids. I mean, I can go in and tell you, here's the process of certification for Cheeto. And it's easier for me to go and say, Elizabeth, could you come in and help us lay out what would be in the language of the organizations we want to work with?
so that's why I'm pointing this out. How do we go about,
Well, the
getting
creation
more
of the platform,
organizations
we're
in that?
developing a series of workshops that we're growing. The one that Rafael Torres did on mitigation is an example. We're going to create various ones on certification as Chido. So we're going not just to the figure that you need to be certified for, but you also need to have a particular set of skills and competencies in your people. The ones that day-to-day, what do you do in the morning when you wake up Chido? Right? What do you do in the afternoon in order to organize workflow, in order to connect and manage 6 projects that are going to come upon you to do housing reconstruction? The organizations don't have that. There are very few. You may call, in Puerto Rico, I think there might be 5 places you may call formally CDCs, Community Development Corporations, like the one you would find here, Bed-Stuy. There are only 5 of that, with that capacity, who would know how to, write a CBDG grant, who would know how to go and, approach a housing trust, who would know who to talk to in order to, acquire 1.2 or $3 million in tax credits, to go and sell them, to then obtain the cash. There's maybe 4 or 5 who really know how to assemble that workflow, using the instruments that are available in the market to tap, into the resources we need to be tapped into. So the objective of these cases have been to sort of to see where is the capacity, how can we learn from that capacity, translate that capacity into operational expertise and learning that from within can also begin to help show the organization what is the pathway to what you just demonstrated, which is this gigantic gap that exists in terms of capacity building to do what we need to do.
Are those 5 within that list of 10?
There are 3 there.
Okay.
3 there. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Applause for the panel. Denise,
And if you have any questions